My own background has been mostly in academic health. I started a long time ago as a professor at the University of Alabama at Birmingham, spent 15 years there. Was one of those younger professors brought to help build UAB to what it is today. In fact, when I arrived there in '87, we were ranked nationally about where GHSU is ranked today nationally for NIH funds. So when we talk about ranking, by the way, we always need to remember that most of what we talk about when we talk about healthcare rankings come from health sciences rankings come from research on one side and clinical care quality, clinical care on the other side. Clinical care quality is a very complex machinery, so generally you're not ranked 1, 2, or 3. You're just ranked in a certain quartile. There's lots of people competing. On the university side, the research part is you're ranked a little less, and I'm just adding that in for you just so that when you hear the term ranking, that's what it means. So anyway, we went from around 70th in the nation to about 13th in the nation during the 15 years that I was there, and I won't take any credit for it except to say that I was one of the many contributing to that particular vision. And then I went on to Los Angeles, and the reason I went to Los Angeles, I think, is important to understand that toward the latter years of my career at UAB, it became very clear that to really manage large academic enterprises, you need to learn how to run a business. You needed to learn how to run multi-million-dollar operations. It wasn't enough to be nationally or internationally known in academics. Lots of people thought that. This is the general conundrum of how faculty think versus administrators think. Faculty thinks that if you are very well versed academically, then that automatically, right, if you're the smartest guy in the room, that automatically makes you the best administrator, the best leader in the room, and that obviously is a major jump of faith. And you keep track of my blogs, you're going to see something about that relatively soon. I went to Los Angeles to run what really is arguably one of the largest OB/GYN departments in the country. That's what I was, an OB/GYN, about $180 million worth of a budget, small by other standards, but nevertheless fairly large. So that's why I'm here today. But this is just briefly about my own background. But more importantly, I'm going to try to recapitulate a little bit of what we've done with the university. So one of the reasons that I was recruited here, I presume, and as verbalized by the Board of Regents, is really that they had this significant investment in Augusta. And they really didn't quite know what to do with it, right? And two, they didn't really quite know where it was going. Okay? And that did lead to some issues related to, should there be opportunities in other campuses elsewhere, even discussions, as rare as they may have been, of second public medical schools and so on and so forth. And so they were unclear. It became very clear to them during the search process that GHSU had great potential, but in many ways had not achieved some of that. So I was brought in with the express clear objective to ensure the transformation of this institution into the nation's top-tier institutions of their kind. Okay? And that's a tall job for anybody, but that's I enjoy challenges, and that's why I'm here.
Good base here, though.
It's a good base, yes, good base. So when I arrived here, we began to really we spent time studying the situation before I actually arrived here. So I spent about 3 or 4 months doing that fairly quietly. Traveled to Georgia a fair amount. And so we identified a number of what we thought were significant threats to the development of GHSU. And I'm going to try to do this off the top of my mind, so I just remember that. But nevertheless, the threats were as follows in no particular order. One of them is that we were latecomers to the game of research. My predecessor did some significant investments in research, and it's thanks to him that actually research began to develop in a tangible way. But as an institution, we really began to get seriously into the game or in the investment of research really in the last 15 years, while most other institutions of our kind have been doing it for at least 30, if not more. That leads to, obviously, reduction in branding and in recognition, right? It's research that makes you cutting edge. It's research that brings a lot of the discovery and a lot of the branding opportunities. Another weakness or threat that we had identified was the lack of significant philanthropic support. There was this myth that somehow, because it was a public state institution, that a vast majority of the budget was supported by the state. And of course, we know today, once we've looked at the numbers, that of the enterprise, the Academic Health Center as a whole, only 16% is actually supported through state dollars. If you take the university only, the teaching component, only 27% is actually supported by the university. The remainder is supported by the faculty or grants and so on and so forth. So this is a national trend at some point we should examine, which is that the differences between private institutions and public institutions in regard to their type of need for philanthropy, for focus strategy, and so on, is decreasing. Today, the amount of money that the state provides for medical student training on a per student basis to, say, Mercer and to GHSU is very close, is very similar, and that is normal in many other states. So I do think that part of what had happened is that we did not recognize that we needed significant philanthropic support. We had never undertaken a large campaign, and that was an issue of a threat. The other, another issue certainly was the ability to have a large dream. In other words, what was the big vision for MCG at the time and GHSU today? And there were a lot of individual visions, right? A lot of colleges had visions, a lot of hospitals had vision, but there were siloed visions. There was no big, overwhelming, single vision that drove where we were going. And so we had to address that as well. We had to address the fact that the hospital and the university, certainly over the last 10 years, have not really always worked together. In fact, the practice plan and the hospital and the university did not work together. And that kind of misstep, that kind of misalignment really weakens the ability of any academic health center to become the next great thing. So that was something we needed to address. There was also significant issues regarding branding. We talked about research as that way of branding, but in general, very little had been focused on branding. Most big institutions really work very hard to make sure that their name and their brand means something, that it's out there. We did not. We, for example, had a name of our institution that had great historic value, but that anybody would tell you across the state of Georgia and certainly nationally was reminiscent of a standalone medical school and really did not reflect the larger university profile. And while it had great value to alumni, right, it did not have great value for the people that we were trying to attract, the new people. Sometimes we make mistakes, right? We think our brand is for those people who are in the family because while the brand is really for the people who are not yet in the family. You're trying to attract.
We face that issue.
And of course, you face that issue all the time. And so branding was an issue. We had to address it. We had to address it in a relatively radical fashion. So those are some of the higher level threats. There's a number of them otherwise. And so we began to try to tackle these. We began. Another threat, by the way, I should mention, is important, is the fact that we were a standalone health sciences university. That is a model of education and a model of a university that is relatively becoming obsolete. There's only about 12 so successful models in the country, only about 4 that are really successful across the nation. So that was something that was clear,
Sure.
It was a structure, if you would. So we began to take that big picture and begin to address them. We addressed branding by beginning to emphasize branding significantly. Of course, we're still going through a fairly painful reorganization of our communications department and my communications and marketing department that we're working through. But we, addressed the name so that the name actually reflected who we were and what we were doing. We integrated the leadership and the administration of the health system and the university. That doesn't mean that they are they remain distinct entities, but the leadership thinks with multiple hats, and so that was very critical to do that. We began to develop a large strategic plan that was enterprise-wide and that we will be rolling out in the next 2 weeks, which I think you need to take a good look at it. It's called Transformation 2020, and it's a very compelling enterprise-wide strategic plan that was developed through interaction between the community, and the university and all the different silos. And so we have one vision, one strategic plan that is going to help us drive forward.
And that's where my first question would go.
Good, and we'll come back to that in a second. Then, of course, then the consolidation has given us an opportunity to really grow to the next level as a university. And you've seen, hopefully, my blog in which I share the data, right, that helps understand why this may be a good thing for both universities, ASU and GHSU. So we've been dealing with these kind of major lever issues that we had to address in order to sort of begin to redirect our efforts to become a top-tier university.
And in fact, that 8-year plan is intriguing in that we've seen little pieces of it so far. The idea of putting a biotech park at Coffin Gardens. This is something you've shared with the chancellor and with the governor's office. And so I guess what other big pieces are you going to address? And do you have any kind of tacit approval from these people to say, yeah, we're behind you guys?
What's the reality behind some of those?
All right, so let me be very clear, because the strategic planning process has been complicated and people are misunderstanding parts of it. There was a vision from the president that was asked of me by the chancellor through the chancellor from the governor. So we had an inquiry from the governor's office. What is the vision for academic health science, what is the vision for health professions education in Georgia? Mm-hmm. And what is the vision of GHSU within that future vision? Okay. That was transmitted to the chancellor. The chancellor obviously transmitted to me. We crafted a vision statement around that. That vision statement really doesn't speak about golf and gardens or biotech parks. I mean, it isn't that level. That vision speaks to the fact that we will become a top 50 research institution of our kind, that we will serve the state in a greater capacity, that we will emphasize a hub and spoke model for the delivery of advanced degrees, that we will emphasize a distributed model across the state for associate, bachelor, and technical type degrees. That GHSU within that hub and spoke model will become, as I said, a top tier academic institution that will hopefully host the second NCI designated cancer center, will increase its student population by about 25%. Presumably that consolidation is part of that vision, so that in fact we become a larger, broader research comprehensive university and not just a standalone health sciences university. So that is a vision that the governor referred to in his speech of January. He has reviewed that vision. He embraced that vision. He embraced it sufficiently to say that he spoke about it. That vision should be out. The highlights of that vision should be out in the next 2 to 4 weeks as well, and we will be communicating about that vision. That is the governor's vision for GHSU and the health sciences professions in Georgia. Of course, it's worked in collaboration with our university, because obviously that's my job to work for him and the chancellor.
One of the practical realities of that is if you're going to become a top 50 research university, you're about 70 now. You have to go from 63 million to 80 to 90 million a year in annual NIH funding. You have a fourth of the research lab capacity of the top 50 universities. Illinois is an example you thrown out. All of that stuff takes money.
Bricks and mortar and people.
And you've done your homework.
And so at this point, I mean, what can you say practically about where's the money going to come from?
So I'm going to come back to Transformation 2020 in a second, because I want to make sure we all know what we're talking about. But this vision clearly is going to require a high level of branding and recruitment so we can get the best of the best. It's going to require us to double our research dollars. And so we have to recruit another 100 to 150 scientists over the next 5 years. It's going to mean that we need to increase our research facilities, as Tom said, by at least double our research facilities in that period of time. It's going to require really significant philanthropic support and investment both by our local community as well as by our state and national communities in this regard. It's going to require us to actually begin to leverage our technology transfer in a smarter way, but that, to be fair, is not an immediate impact. Technology transfer takes time to develop the research and the inventions in the market, and so it's going to be philanthropy is going to drive this. If you study, great academic, great American universities, and there's a wonderful book that I recommend that you all read. It's called The Great American University by Jonathan Cole, who's former provost at Columbia. You know, one of the standard driving elements of great academic, great American universities across the board is their high level of philanthropic support by their local community, by philanthropists, and obviously in many cases by the state. And the reason is that at the end of the day, educational institutions are not revenue generating for-profits. In fact, the number of academic entities across the nation that are for-profit in a true sense of the word tend to be the online, short-term, short-degree providing institutions. The vast majority of educational institutions really are part of that social contract between society, who says we want universities in our place because it elevates our educational level of our citizens, it elevates our economic impact, it elevates our importance, and the contract that says, yes, but if you want us here, you will also need to help support us. And that contract is one of those levers that we have not really ever recognized well in many communities. Augusta is one of them, but in many other communities as well, which is why often universities will fail. The universities are always part and parcel, a partnership between their communities and the university.
What gives you the idea that the two pieces? One is that the community is ready to give, and that you also have the development resources you feel like you need in place to go get that money.
So I believe that many members of our community are ready to give and have been giving. You know, the Education Commons building, we have raised so far $15 million, of which a significant portion of that is from Augusta. And that actually reflects to us that there is the willingness to give. It is also true that many philanthropists and would-be philanthropists in Augusta yet are still waiting on the sidelines to see if this is really a match that will be won. But we are working very hard in that regard, and we do believe that the community, both locally as well as statewide, is ready to begin to support the Academic Health Center of the state of Georgia, which is Georgia Health Sciences University. That will be the key to success. Without that, we will not succeed.
The matches between you and who?
Well, the matches between ourselves and every other institution of academic interest in the state of Georgia and in the nation. But you see that the matches are global. This is why in today's world, and obviously you have somebody who does this and has done this for a living, this is not about being afraid of the competition. I think that there is excessive discussion of the fear of the competition rather than insufficient discussion relating to what our strengths are and how we are going to really address a global competition, a competition that is not just local hospitals or statewide universities or private universities in Georgia. These are competitions for the brain and the talents of researchers across the globe, for the best students in Georgia, for the patients across the entirety of the region, including Georgia, Florida, and South Carolina. This is a much more global competition. And so this is truly today a time for people who have to relish competition and have to be willing to actually adapt. You know, I tell my team that we love our competitors because they will determine for us how fast we move and what our ideas are. Without them, we're just going to be sitting still.
Yeah, as far as the consolidation goes, obviously that's very early stage. You have committees that are working on this. I'm sure the name has not been decided on, or even close.
And you would have an inkling, I promise you, but no, not at all. Not even near.
Are there givens, though, that you can say at this point, you're going to have 2 campuses? That's probably a given. You're going to need student housing. I mean, are there truths that you can say at this point that you know for sure?
So I'm going to take a step back and talk about Transformation 2020 and then come back to that. So Transformation 2020 is a strategic plan, not a vision. It's a strategic plan which is around that vision that we have worked with the governor to determine how we are going to become what the governor, the state of Georgia, our community, our own institution wants us to be. And that is the one that we will also be publishing over the next 2-3. Actually, that will be published over the next 2 weeks, and we can get you a preliminary copy today, and we'll do that. Okay, from that point of view. So I just want to make sure that we don't mix the vision, right, of the governor, because that's a vision, right, and then of course the how-to, right, which is the true strategic plan. And people have been working very hard on that strategic plan. So the strategic plan called Transformation 2020. The governor's vision is, of course, the governor's vision. So
you have to retrofit ASU in here because this was developed before the ASU piece was coming in.
It was. But at the end of the day, the beauty about a strategic plan is that it's always flexible. It's always sculpting in clay. We're always trying to adapt. And secondly, we value the same things that ASU does. We value good education. We value good training. We value good faculty members. And so there are lots of things that we value, as you'll see in the strategic plan today, that is very much dovetails with ASU. And in fact, if you look at strategic plan and you remove the words, health professions, you leave everything else in there, it'll be almost identical to that of what you would expect. So let me come back to the ASU piece of consolidation. And I am, to be fair, very honored to be able to lead that effort in the future. I mean, that was a determination that the Chancellor made that once Dr. Bloodworth retired and the consolidation then would be led by the president of GHSU. It didn't have to happen that way. It couldn't certainly be a new search for a new president or anything else like that. And so I'll take that prerogative to sort of give some general elements of what I envision, right, after the consolidation. And as I'm learning, first I'm spending an awful lot of time learning about ASU. I put out a blog this week about listening because it's really pretty critical that we listen carefully. But I will tell you the following. We will work and we will function as one integrated university. We may have multiple campuses, but even today we have multiple campuses. I have four campuses of the School of Medicine. I have 3 campuses, or 3 partnerships, 2 campuses for the College of Nursing. So the reality is, geographic locations is not the way you run an institution. I mean, if you go to University of Georgia today, or Georgia Tech, or any other large university, Johns Hopkins, where I trained, there are multiple campuses related to different things. Some are smaller, right, maybe related to a particular specialty, and some are larger because they have the undergraduates and others are not. So the multiple campuses should not detract from us functioning as one integrated university. And so we will, once consolidation is approved by SACS, Southern Association of Colleges and Schools, we will function as one university. We will have one provost, one president. We will not, and we will be avoiding creating parallel silos. We've worked very hard at our current integration to do that. We will continue to do that. But we have an advantage over many other institutions, and that is we have been through an integration. Now, the integration of the health system and the university up to now has been different, right? Because they are, and we are supposed to, and continue to function as separate entities. But the leadership thinks the same. So we've had that experience. Secondly, we will have, whatever the name is, will be chosen really by both a combination of careful branding analysis, careful study by individuals that will not be the president, by the way. And then we will have and garner the input of both our internal communities and our external communities. But the name will have to reflect who we are. And my only things that I can say of a name are most likely it won't have more than 3 words in it. It will have university in it. and it won't have health in it. And that's all I can really say about the name, and I probably spoke even too much today.
So a third of it's done.
Well, could you give us a sense of the timeline as to when you learned about the plans of the consolidation and that you would be heading up the merged schools?
So there's been a lot of discussion about transparency. But the reality is, I do think that individuals have exaggerated. You know, there's a lot of people who really love to discuss, conspiracies and so on and so forth. But the reality is, it wasn't really very hard. I read your newspaper for many months, and there was lots of talk in the newspaper about possible consolidation. So the rumor on the street, if you would, the people conversation, had been that a possible consolidation had been talked on in the streets for at least 6 months, since the moment the chancellor announced that that was one of his intentions. Okay? We didn't have a lot of forewarning. The presidents weren't really heavily involved in that, and I don't really begrudge that. At times, governing boards, leading boards have to make decisions that are politically difficult without actually, if you would, imperiling or endangering the people who are actually going to have to do the work. So while, it would have been nice to know more, if you would, because if I had, I probably wouldn't have had my surgery at the time that I did and all those kind of things. Having said that, I respect that. People need to make a decision. The Board of Regents has the responsibility with the chancellor to make those decisions. And so we officially did not know anything until the Thursday where you all knew about it as well. I mean, I at least did not. Maybe Dr. Bloodworth did, but I certainly did not. And there's nothing serious about it. There's nothing nefarious about it. I mean, can I tell you that I didn't sort of hear it on the street? Absolutely not. We all were hearing it. We just didn't really know if it was going to become a reality.
But in September or November, you started thinking, oh, this is a possibility.
No. We actually began to think about this. As soon as the the chancellor said that there may be a consolidation, I thought, well, one possibility would be this. All of the presidents across the entirety of the system, each of us was thinking as we talked to each other in meetings, is it going to be you or is it going to be me or is it no? Because in fact we had no real roots. So all of us were thinking, and it's our job to really think ahead, to think of possibilities. So the reality is that while this was decided and we were not necessarily, the presidents were not involved in that kind of decision, it is what it is. And at the end of the day, as I put together in my blog, it is the right thing.
Well, since a lot of the public and some alumni from both schools seem to be caught off guard by the merger, could it have been handled, at least the announcement, could it have been handled differently or better to inform?
So the short answer to you is no. Okay, this I think was handled as good as it could have been handled across the board. And if we look back 10 years from now, we will look back and say this was handled extraordinarily well. There is no blood in the streets. There's no major, hanging presidents and officials out to dry. The Board of Regents and the chancellors have taken the chancellor have taken the appropriate cover and responsibility for everything that happened. Let me just remind you, this is a credible transformation that few states, if any, have actually ever undertaken. A sort of group, a multi-institution consolidation. Under a very transparent process, the consolidation itself. The decision had to be made in a way that was that gave protection to those of us who had to actually do the job, and avoid a lot of the political infighting. Because in fact, at the end of the day, we have more experience, and you have more stories to say about initiatives that started and got grounded into a halt because of voices that actually should have never been listened to, than initiatives that actually did happen. So I will tell you that I don't think that it could have been or should have been handled any differently. I mean, would have I personally liked to have better, heads up? Sure, I would have had my surgery. I could have had a communication team in place and strategy. I'm still struggling with the strategy to figure it out and so on and so forth. But you know what? Those are minor. Remember, this is a consolidation that should stay on the ground for another 100 years.
Sure.
I read reread the letter by Dr. Nesbitt, who's wrote about this incoming piece that there's, the identity of the School of Medicine in Athens, and all those pieces have kind of been out there for a while, leaving a lot of questions there. And then also looking again at the article, like the potential hazards. You said, and this is kind of a rare thing, even rarer, the medical school and with a school, a
Not a
local
medical
identity.
school, please.
Yes.
Start using the term. We'll talk about at the end of that
Gotcha.
things that I'm going to ask you all to begin to address.
I appreciate that. But
The Health Sciences University and a regular comprehensive university.
This is a rare piece. So putting those together, there's some hazards yet to uncover. What are some of those things you're starting to think about that are going to be hurdles or hazards?
So there's lots of hazards, and certainly all of us are going to have to be working very, very hard to avoid them. Some of the hazards are actually less than people think about. For example, mixing of student cultures is less of an issue than people think about it. Why? Because most big universities, the undergraduate culture tends to be different than the graduate culture to begin with. In most universities, the health systems are different than the standard liberal arts. I mean, if you go to UCLA, the interaction between medical students in the medical school at UCLA and the anthropology students in the undergraduate campus is minimal to none. So that has been something that people have brought up, and actually it's a relatively minor issue. We work at it. In fact, at the end of the day, it's going to enrich the student offerings. Our students will now have things to go to, athletic fairs and arts and so on and so forth. The other students will have actually more access to research projects, more access to students who can counsel them and mentor them and who understand how to develop careers. So at the end of the day, it's going to be positive from a student point of view. The offerings that students will have will be greater, right? Because there are going to be lots of synergies between the different faculty. A challenge, though, will be addressing faculty culture. That will be a significant one. We will have to work carefully with the faculty to understand that now they are all part of a comprehensive research university. They're not just in silos. But this was actually something that we had to deal with at GHSU. The faculty in one college had a very different culture than the faculty of another college, and it was different from the third college. So we've been working on trying to create a uniform faculty culture across the GHSU, and then we'll continue to work with our ASU partners and colleagues to try to do that. So that's one area that will require a lot of work, but it will require a lot of flexibility on everybody's part. But what we can say is it will not remain the same. Anybody who feels that the culture of the faculty will stay the same has not understood what we're going through. Salary disparities may be there, although frankly, that's also less of an issue. The reason it's less of an issue is that we tend to lump clinical faculty salary all together into one pile, but we don't really understand, and we don't explain very well that salary really, a large chunk of it comes from the clinical practice of those individuals, right? Or comes from their research grants. So we are now in the process of beginning to more clearly describe what part of somebody's salary comes from clinical operations versus comes from a research operation versus comes from the institution to educate. And when you begin to do that, you'll see that the salaries are not that different. Because frankly, we have the same issue at GHSU today between the salaries, say, of individuals, professors in allied health sciences or nursing versus professors of, say, dentistry and medicine, which have clinical practice.
It is complicated. We do want like a pie chart for each person.
We're gonna work it. Actually, we're gonna work on something like that.
You have a base salary, and then people can earn above that.
Exactly, and certainly, but you see this also in big comprehensive universities. Economists, for example, make a significant supplement above their base salary because they run institutes or think tanks. Lawyers do the same thing, consultation. So we're going to try to be more clear about that because that's actually one of those things that we need to deal with. But that has something to do with it. Certainly dealing with different campuses is going to be an issue, so we're going to have a presence. Very likely, I will be moving my offices to the ASU Somerville campuses. The provost will likely stay on the health sciences campus. and so on and so forth. That is, again, a plan, not a final. But we will need to distribute that because we do need to have a presence, And frankly, I really enjoy the Somerville campus, and so I may take, lunchtime walks through the campus.
It's not fun.
So significant consolidation of administration.
Absolutely. So the administration and administrative support structure will be one. They will not be individualized. There will be one university. Now, obviously, as you work your way down the administration ladder, there will be individuals servicing this unit or that unit. That's normal, and even today we have that. But from a leadership administrative structure, it'll be one university.
And so you have to deal, though, with, as your friend Dr. Krugman pointed out, when they consolidated, they had one school that was on a semester system, another school that's on the year-round system. The deadline for student loan applications for this group is different than that one. You have all sorts of logistical things that still would need to work out, and who's going to follow whose system at this point?
Well, actually, the reality is that it varies. ASU, for example, has some very high level of student services that GHSU does not have. And so we will certainly be adapting and adopting a lot of those practices to our own entity because we don't have as good a student life as we would like to. For no other reason than our students actually have a less interest, right? Graduate students are trying to hurry through and finish and so on and so forth. Our research, for example, at GHSU is going to be, a much more mature research machinery. So that we'll adapt that to ASU and so on. So the beauty about this is that there are really positives on both sides that we're going to be bringing in. But the key, the other principle that you may need to know is I will be searching for excellence. And I will be searching for best in class. I will not, and have not, and will continue not to have tolerance for good enough is enough. So if we have it locally, we will use it. If we do not, we will bring it in. Because in some areas, neither institution really has excellence. And we need to ensure that our community and our state has excellence.
One of the big growth areas for you that you mentioned is the Nci Cancer Center. You brought in Dr. Clee. When you're looking at that, growing to the top 50 university in research, is that one of your key ways you get there is bringing in a lot more cancer research and along with that, upping the level of clinical trials that you provide, upping the level of sophisticated.
So there obviously to become a top 50 institution is going to require us to work very hard in many, many different levels. We talk often about focusing on health sciences research because that's what we have today. But as we become a consolidated university, I think it's going to be very important that we understand that also we need to enhance the opportunities, if you would, thank you very much, the opportunities in the undergraduate degrees in the business school and the education school and the humanities and liberal arts and so on. And I think it's important to realize that you can't become a top 50 institution based only on health sciences. That's why the synergy of actually an academic health center and a small comprehensive university actually gives you a better result in a top 50 institution than does just being an academic health center, a standalone health sciences university. So among the many initiatives, one of them, of course, is going to be around cancer. And we will also be emphasizing, regenerative reparative medicine, public and preventive health, personalized and genomic medicine, cardiovascular biology. So there's lots of areas that we're already going to be emphasizing. But to become an NCI designated cancer center, that designation primarily circles around the amount of innovative, cutting-edge research and researchers that you have. And of course, as you bring in high-quality researchers who really are the experts, the world's experts on particular topics, your ability to offer clinical care, particularly around that group of diseases and disorders, actually increases as well. That's why NCI designation, while it circles primarily around the ability of that institution to provide NCI research, also elevates the quality of the care given and, of course, elevates the kind of education you're providing, because now you truly have the world's experts, the professors, if you would, there. But that's just one of the strategies that we're going to pursue to become, if you would, a top-tier institution.
Being an Nci Center also requires you to do a significant amount of community education, and that leads us to sort of this idea of how is your relationship with the community at this point? You had kind of a kerfuffle over the Laney Walker idea. There's been the recent spat between the foundation and some of the city leaders. I mean, how would you characterize the relationship with the Augusta community, with the commission, the leadership?
So I will maybe perhaps naively, but I would characterize that that certainly my administration's relationship and my person individually with the community has been a very positive one. We have good dialogues. I like vigorous dialogues. I think that there's lots of discussion about, did Laney Walker discussion really proceed appropriately? But I think you will see over time that it proceeded quite appropriately. It is okay for the community to express concerns about things that they're actually less clear about. What it did teach me, of course, is that perhaps I need to take more time to educate individuals. But even then, we spent some time doing that. And at the end of the day, it is okay for communities to speak up and not always necessarily just go ahead with everything. It's a dialogue. My job is to dialogue with the community. But I do think that we have had a good relationship with the community, and not just one sector of the community, but a broad sector of the community. The other day we had our Gilbert Manor monument dedication. It was well attended. Lots of individuals from lots of parts of our community were there. And I was really proud. It was not something that I actually could take credit for. It actually began in my predecessor's tenure. But it was something that demonstrated, again, our continued commitment to recognizing, really, the past, but always looking to the future. One of the things that I will say is that this president, in particular, I really do not have a lot of patience for individuals who only look to the past and do not know and understand that you cannot drive to the future looking in the rearview mirror. We have to understand the past, respect the past, understand why things may or may not have worked in the past. But the future, unfortunately, is mostly uncharted. So we have to use lessons from everywhere, including the past.
Tom, we have about 2 more minutes.
Jason, any questions for the
What is next on my agenda? What is next on my agenda?
Meeting back.
So, well, we can stretch it a little bit. We came in late, so we need to do that.
Part of my BA is covering the larger Laney Walker revitalization project.
Yes.
Can you tell me a little bit about university's involvement, if any, and stakes and goals?
We are very. So let me start out by saying that all universities need to grow in partnership with their cities. Very few universities actually can become a great university in the middle of a city that is decaying or breaking down. And you can see that anywhere. You can look at a Duke, you can do it at Johns Hopkins, you can see anywhere. At the end of the day, the university does have a significant interest in making sure the city does better. Why? It isn't as altruistic as you may think. It simply has to do with the fact that a city that does better can support the university better in turn. A city that does better will actually be a better partner for growth and a better partner for discussions that are complicated and complex at times, that answers are not that simple. A city that is actually doing better, right, will provide more donors and philanthropists in that regard. And at the end of the day, a city that is more attractive will be easier to recruit into than a city that is not. So the city and a university have to be working together very closely. A predecessor of mine at University of Alabama at Birmingham in the 1970s spoke about this, about the city and the university and how they were one and the same. So we want the city to continue to improve all sectors of the city. And at the end of the day, it is a genuine, rational, logical statement. This is not about simply fluff. Laney Walker, the corridor of Laney Walker, is one of the areas that abuts our university. And people have always asked, Why is it that we have an interest in land in that area and so on and so forth? But at the end of the day, the reason is we are there. So there's no nefarious issue. I mean, if we're going to grow in that area, we have to grow in that area. We can't have multiple campuses of health, for example. That would not be very effective. You can have multiple campuses of university. So we want the Laney Walker corridor in that community to grow, to improve. We're very, very supportive to the extent that we can. And so we are trying to be as good partners as we can by doing so. However, I will say that I've been a little bit surprised by the fact that very often individuals in the city are, and even in leadership in the city, are creating plans for the city, whether it is sale of property, whether it is the creation of certain avenues of medical districts, that they want to define, whatever it is, without absolutely any conversation with the university. They just are creating their plan, stating that they're going to support the university, and yet there is no dialogue. And that is something that has to stop at some point. We must begin to dialogue to carry this forward. Okay? Because at the end of the day, we are all one community. It is true that I represent a state asset in Augusta. And it is true that Georgia Health Sciences University does not belong to Augusta in the same way that it would be a city property. But it is also true that my home is here, that my faculty's home is here, that many of my patients are here, that my students live here. And this is our home, and it's a dialogue. So that is why at times you see when decisions are made that appear to be unilateral, we decide that this area is going to be built up and called a medical district, or that area is going to be revitalized, or that property is going to be sold. And there's no conversation with the university proper about how can we help you build since you are the number 2 employer in the city. That's a little bit odd.
Sure. Well, that issue is only going to double with twice the size of what we have now, sort of single entity.
That is correct.
May give you an opportunity sort of to answer one more question then close, because I do want to have just a few minutes to get your feedback on our coverage, maybe some ideas about things you think we ought to do in the coming year. If you could close with that, with also just sort of, if you could address the question of how quickly do you think we'll see some visible footprint changes downtown, if downtown, in the next year or two with these pieces? Going back to Golf and Gardens, or any ideas you see about physical size to address the growth that's been talked about?
So let's be clear. There is a lot of discussion sometimes about being landlocked, that our universities are landlocked. And to be fair, we're significantly less landlocked than people assume. It is true that it is easier to pave over large areas to make flat parking lots, but at the end of the day, you can build a parking building on a fifth or a even smaller footprint. So there is this misconception that currently the university needs a lot more land to grow, and the answer is we always need more land, but in the immediate future, we do not need necessarily more land. What we want is strategic land. We want land that adds value to our offerings. We want land that actually synergizes with the city so that we can help the city improve. You asked me, how is it that we can help the city improve? We need land to do that. But it has to be significant pieces of land. A university can't just grow on even a block. That's just not going to create any kind of significant importance. Okay, so coming to your question, which I don't mean to avoid, I can't tell you how soon you're going to see changes in the downtown related to this university. But I can tell you that we are looking seriously to try to develop additional student housing in the downtown area. Many of our students like urban living. We have to begin to address the safety issues in that area. Any that remain, that'll be very critical. I cannot put my students in areas that are dangerous. That is, as you know, the whole conversation, Laney Walker, while occasionally people lost sight of that, it is all about student safety, and that is my number one job. Okay? We will also be looking at perhaps having some additional facilities there if we can find the right partners and the right amount of land. But again, all of that really depends. What opportunities arise.
Right, and that comes from a hope or an idea of some kind of puzzle pieces fitting together for downtown revitalization, as well as what the university needs.
This is one of those things where the city of Augusta has lots of wonderfully well-intentioned individuals, lots of great people. I've actually been amazed at the commitment that people have to Augusta and to the university and to other institutions. What I've also been amazed is how few of those individuals actually talk to each other, how few of them actually want to sort of bring together and say, it's okay, somebody else can take credit for this. Let's just sort of figure out how to get across this barrier. But we're getting there. I mean, to be fair, in the last year, 12 months that I've been here, I've been hearing more and more people that say to us, let's find these solutions. It doesn't matter who takes credit. Let's get this done. And so I think that you'll be seeing a sea of change in that regard, and I'm actually very excited about it.